He was 7 years younger, but the billionaire waited 8 years to win her. He was just 17 when he fell for her, the woman who taught him what love meant. 8 years, a fortune, and a lifetime later, the billionaire finally returns. Not to impress her, but to win her heart the right way. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready to dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So, let's get started. The first time Jerry Blakemore saw Frances, she was standing behind the counter of Willow's Corner, a small bookstore cafe tucked between two crumbling brick buildings in downtown Atlanta. Sunlight spilled across her face like a quiet blessing, catching on the faint freckles that no amount of maturity could hide. He was 17, a kid with rough hands from unloading crates after school, wearing a shirt that didn't quite fit. She was 24, poised, graceful, and unknowingly magnetic. He came every afternoon, claiming he liked the smell of books, but in truth, he came for her. "Back again?" she asked one evening, sliding him a cup of cocoa he couldn't afford. "You read faster than anyone I know." Jerry smiled, pretending confidence. "Maybe I just like good company." Frances laughed softly, the kind of laugh that wraps itself around your ribs and stays there long after you've gone home. "You've got a line for everything, don't you?" He didn't know what love was. He only knew it felt like this. Her voice, the glow of amber light, the hush between pages, and the ache of knowing she'd never look at him the same way. Every day she encouraged him, told him to dream bigger, to believe that he could be more than the boy from the forgotten part of town. And Jerry, wide-eyed and hopeful, made a promise to himself that night, that one day he'd come back to her, not as the boy who admired her, but as a man she could love. 8 years later, the skyline of Atlanta reflected in the glass walls of Blakemore Holdings. Jerry stood by the window of his top-floor office, the city humming beneath his feet. Success, power, wealth, he had it all. But every victory felt strangely hollow. His assistant knocked softly. "Sir, your meeting with the board starts in 10. He nodded without turning. His gaze lingered on the small photograph taped inside his leather wallet. Frances, laughing, holding a coffee cup, unaware he'd taken the picture. It was worn, the edges frayed, but it had followed him everywhere. He touched it gently, a habit that had become almost sacred. 8 years, he murmured, and I still can't forget you. There had been other women, models, heiresses, people who wanted the billionaire, not the boy inside him. But none of them could silence the memory of the woman who believed in him before anyone else did. That evening, a news report flickered across the TV in his office, a local feature on small bookstores surviving in the modern world. There she was, Frances Lane, still running Willow's Corner, still smiling through the same window where he used to watch her from the sidewalk. The world seemed to go quiet around him. He closed his eyes. She's still there. 8 years, countless miles, and his heart, stubborn, loyal, relentless, had been waiting all this time. Jerry reached for his keys, a strange nervousness bubbling up inside him, something no billion-dollar deal had ever made him feel. For the first time in years, Jerry Blakemore wasn't thinking like a businessman. He was thinking like a 17-year-old boy who had never really stopped loving her. Have you ever held on to someone for years, not because you had to, but because your heart simply refused to let go? Tell me in the comments. Would you wait 8 years for love? The soft chime of the cafe door startled Frances out of her thoughts. It was late afternoon, that quiet lull between the lunch rush and the after-work crowd. She looked up automatically, ready with her usual smile. Then she froze. Jerry Blakemore stood in the doorway, taller now, broader, his tailored navy suit a far cry from the shy teenager who used to fumble with coffee change. But it was his eyes that undid her. The same deep brown, still carrying that spark of boyish wonder, and something else. Something heavier. "Francis?" he said softly, almost reverently, as if speaking her name might break the spell. Her heart gave a traitorous jolt. "Jerry?" she managed, voice thin. I didn't recognize you." He smiled, that old, disarming grin. "Guess I finally took your advice. Dreamed bigger." She blinked, still processing. "It's been a long time. 8 years," he said without hesitation. "You remembered me." "Of course I did," she replied quickly, then regretted how fast it came out. She busied herself with the espresso machine, hands trembling. "You used to practically live here, and you used to tell me to stop drinking so much cocoa," he teased gently, watching her every movement. The silence between them thickened, not awkward, but weighted, humming with everything unspoken. Francis felt the years stretch out like a long, aching bridge between them. He looked so different, confident, magnetic, a man who could command a room with a glance. Yet right now, in front of her, he looked human, nervous even. "So," she began, forcing steadiness. "What brings you back here? Nostalgia?" Jerry hesitated. The easy answer sat on his tongue, business, coincidence, passing by. But none of it felt right. "Maybe," he said softly, "maybe I just missed the coffee." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Still a terrible liar." He leaned on the counter, his gaze steady, unflinching. "I missed the person who made it." The words hung in the air, too direct, too intimate. Francis inhaled sharply, eyes flicking toward the door as if escape might save her from this flood of memory. "Jerry," she began, but her voice faltered. "You shouldn't." "Say what I mean," he interrupted gently. "You taught me to do that." The clock ticked loudly in the background. For a moment, Francis was 24 again, standing in that same golden light, hearing that same tremble in his voice. And for a fleeting second, she let herself wonder what might have been if life hadn't been so cruelly timed. But then reality returned. The years between them, the rumors that would spread, the fear of wanting something she'd long buried. She forced a smile. "You've done well for yourself, Jerry. I'm proud of you." He tilted his head. "That means more than you think." Francis turned away, pretending to wipe a spotless counter. "You should visit more often. Your old corner's still there." "I plan to," he murmured. When he finally left, Francis exhaled shakily, pressing a hand against her chest. His scent, a faint mix of cedar and memory, lingered in the air long after the door closed. And Jerry, stepping into the fading light, felt a storm building inside him. The spark he'd carried for 8 years had just reignited, not a flicker, but a wildfire. He looked back once more through the glass window, watching her tuck a stray curl behind her ear. He whispered, 8 years, and she still has no idea. Do you believe some connections never fade, no matter the time, distance, or silence? Drop a comment. Would you have walked away, or stayed to see what destiny had planned? For 3 days, Jerry couldn't focus on anything else. Not on meetings, contracts, or the million-dollar deals flashing across his phone. Every thought kept circling back to her. Francis Lane, standing in that little bookstore cafe like time itself had never moved. He told himself he wasn't obsessed, just curious, just nostalgic. But nostalgia didn't make your chest ache like this. It didn't keep you up at 3 a.m. wondering if she'd smiled after you left. On the 4th evening, he found himself parked outside Willow's Corner again, headlights off, watching the last customers leave. Through the window, Frances was closing the register, tucking her hair behind her ear just as she used to. He should have gone home, but he didn't. The bell above the door chimed softly. Frances looked up, startled, then sighed with a faint smile. "Jerry," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Back again already? You planning to buy me out of cocoa this time?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I thought I'd stop by before heading home. It's been a long week." "Running a billion-dollar company will do that," she said lightly, turning away to refill the sugar jar. "You don't have to check in here, you know. You've moved way beyond this place." Jerry's brow furrowed. Maybe some places never stop feeling like home. Her hands froze. The words were soft, but they hit too close. "Jerry," she began gently, "you're kind, but this, whatever you're trying to do, you don't owe me anything." "I'm not here because I owe you," he replied quietly. "I'm here because I want to be." That stopped her. She looked at him, really looked. The boy she once knew was gone. In his place stood a man whose eyes still carried that same unguarded warmth, but tempered by pain and time. "It's been 8 years," she said after a moment, forcing a calm tone. "People change." "Not all people," he said. Her voice dropped. "And what about what people will say? You're younger, Jerry. You have a whole different life now." He smiled sadly. "You think I care what they say? I built an empire, Frances. The one thing I couldn't build was a way to stop missing you." That silence again. Heavy, tender, dangerous. Frances turned toward the shelves, pretending to reorganize them. Her pulse was racing. She wanted to tell him to leave, to stop stirring things she'd worked years to bury. But then he said softly, "You once told me to chase what I believe in. I'm just doing that. Don't use my words against me," she said, voice trembling. "Maybe they were never yours to begin with," he murmured. "Maybe they were mine. I just needed you to say them first." Frances felt her composure slipping. "Jerry, you should go." He stepped back, nodding. "If that's what you want." She didn't answer, and the silence was answer enough. He hesitated at the door, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. Two worlds still divided by time, yet pulled together by something neither could deny. When he left, Frances locked the door behind him, leaned her forehead against the cool glass, and whispered to the empty street, "Don't make me remember you again." Outside, Jerry exhaled deeply, staring at the faint reflection of her silhouette in the window. He'd waited 8 years. He could wait a little longer. But this time he wasn't leaving without finding out if love, real, complicated love, could wait too. Sometimes the heart wants what logic refuses to allow. Be honest, would you walk away to protect someone's peace, or stay to fight for love that might break you? Share your thoughts below. 3 days passed since that night. 3 painfully long days where Frances convinced herself that Jerry wouldn't come back, that maybe she'd said enough to make him see reason. But fate, as it turned out, had a cruel sense of humor. It was Thursday afternoon when a city official walked into Willow's corner holding a clipboard. Frances was arranging a new display when she overheard the words that made her blood run cold. Redevelopment project, demolition by next quarter. The Blakemore expansion plan. Her stomach dropped. "Excuse me, did you say Blakemore?" The man nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The new Urban Renewal Initiative. The company's CEO has already signed off on Phase 2. This block's marked for redevelopment." Frances's voice wavered. "You mean this building?" "Afraid so." She stood frozen long after he left. The walls around her, shelves that had held her dreams, the counter where she'd built her small world, suddenly felt fragile, temporary. And then the bell above the door rang again. When she looked up, the name on the clipboard now had a face, his. "Frances," Jerry said carefully, reading her expression. "You found out." Her voice came out sharp. "You're behind this? You're tearing this place down." "It's not like that," he said quickly, stepping closer. It's a city plan. I didn't even realize this property was part of it until this morning. And what happens to me, Jerry? To this shop? You think you can just buy the street that built you and call it progress? He winced at her words. You think I'd ever destroy the one place that made me believe in myself? No, I'll fix this. I promise. Her laugh was bitter. Promises don't rebuild memories. He looked around, the nostalgia in his eyes almost unbearable. Then let me help. Let me fight for this place with you. She crossed her arms. Why? Guilt? No, he said quietly. Because I care about what it means to you, to us. The way he said us made her heartbeat stumble. She wanted to stay angry, to keep her armor intact, but his sincerity broke through every wall she'd built. By the end of the day, she found herself sitting across from him in her back office, papers scattered between them. Property documents, zoning plans, deadlines. Felt surreal. 8 years ago, she'd helped him with his school applications on this same desk. Now he was helping her save the only home she knew. You don't have to do this, she whispered, signing a form. I'll figure something out. I know, he said softly, but I want to. Maybe this is how I make things right. For a while, they worked in silence. Outside, the rain began, soft at first, then steady. Francis noticed his sleeves rolled up, his expensive watch glinting beneath the dim light. She saw traces of the boy he once was, the one who used to laugh too loud, dream too big. And Jerry saw the woman who had never stopped inspiring him. Her strength, her fire, her quiet sadness. Funny? Francis murmured, breaking the silence. 8 years later, and here we are, trying to save something we both built. He looked at her, his voice low. Maybe we're both trying to save something we both lost. The words settled between them like truth neither could escape. That night, when Francis locked up, she watched him leave under the glow of streetlights. Despite herself, she smiled faintly. Maybe fate didn't just bring people back. Maybe it gave them a reason to stay. Sometimes life corners us with the very person we're trying to avoid, not to punish us, but to heal what time couldn't. Cloud with rain. Tell me in the comments, do you believe in second chances disguised as coincidences? The next morning, Francis arrived at Willow's Corner before dawn. The sky outside was still bruised with gray, and the air carried the kind of stillness that made secrets easier to confess. She wasn't expecting him, but Jerry was already there. Sitting at one of the tables near the window, sleeves rolled up, papers spread out, 2 cups of coffee waiting. You don't sleep, do you? She said, setting down her bag. He smiled faintly. Not when something matters. Francis sat across from him, her eyes darting to the folder of property plans. So, what's the damage? I made a few calls, Jerry replied. We have options, renovation instead of demolition. But it'll need approval from the city council. She nodded, avoiding his gaze. You don't have to do this, Jerry. He leaned forward slightly. Francis, I want to. This place meant everything to me. You meant. He stopped himself, his throat tightening. Her hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together. Jerry, please don't say things you don't mean. You were a boy then. You didn't know what love was. Maybe not, he said quietly. But I knew what it felt like to want someone to see me. And you did. You were the only one who ever did. She turned her head, blinking hard. You don't know what you're saying. He rose slowly, walked toward the shelf lined with old photos and trinkets, mementos of a life she'd quietly built. He picked up a small framed picture. Francis standing beside a man, both smiling. Jerry's voice softened. He was the fiancé, wasn't he? Francis froze. Yes, she whispered. Evan. He was a teacher. We were engaged, until the accident. The air thickened with grief. Jerry set the frame down gently, his voice barely above a breath. I'm sorry. It was 8 years ago, she murmured. Right before you left for college. He was kind, steady. And when he died, I stopped believing love was meant for me. So when you looked at me the way you did, She shook her head, tears threatening. I couldn't bear to let someone else believe I was whole when I wasn't. Jerry's chest ached. He stepped closer, but not enough to invade her space. You weren't supposed to fix anything, he said softly. You were the reason I learned how to believe in more than pain. You showed me kindness when I had nothing. That's what love looks like to me. Her breath hitched. You shouldn't say that. It's the truth, he said. I spent years chasing success thinking it would make me feel worthy of you. But standing here now, I realize I was already enough back then. You just didn't see it. She finally looked up, really looked, and for the first time in years, Frances saw not the boy she once pitied, but the man who had carried her in his heart through every victory and failure. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, sacred, like standing on the edge of something beautiful and terrifying all at once. Then Frances spoke softly. You shouldn't have waited for me, Jerry. He smiled, sad but sure. I didn't wait for you. I waited for us. Her eyes shimmered, and she turned away before the tears fell. Don't make promises you can't keep, he whispered. I already did. 8 years ago. That night, Frances sat alone in her apartment, the memory of his voice echoing through her mind. For the first time in forever, she let herself cry. Not from grief, but from something dangerously close to hope. Sometimes the past isn't a chain. It's a bridge we were always meant to cross. Tell me in the comments, if someone waited 8 years for you, would you believe in love again? For the first time in weeks, Willow's corner felt alive again. The storm had passed, both outside and between them. Jerry had spent the morning fixing the cafe's leaky window, his suit jacket tossed over a chair, sleeves rolled high. Frances watched him from behind the counter, pretending to organize receipts but smiling despite herself. Never thought I'd see the day Jerry Blakemore repaired a window himself, she teased. He grinned. You'd be surprised what I remember from working here. I wasn't just flirting all the time. She hummed, raising an eyebrow. That's debatable. He laughed. And for a moment, it was as if the years between them melted away. The boy she once knew flickered through the man before her. But there was a difference now. Maturity in his eyes, steadiness in his voice, and a kind of love that had weathered distance and time. When the repairs were done, they shared lunch at the corner table, the same one where he used to sit with his Coco years ago. Frances had packed sandwiches, and Jerry, to her amusement, had brought an expensive bottle of sparkling water like it was some grand gesture. So, she said, chewing thoughtfully, do billionaires really eat sandwiches like normal people? He leaned back with a smirk. Only when the company's worth it. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed slightly. Still a charmer. I've had 8 years to practice, he replied softly. The way he said it, gentle, honest, without pressure, made her heart flutter and ache all at once. She looked down, trying to calm the storm in her chest. You shouldn't say things like that. He tilted his head. Why not? They're true. Because, she whispered, I'm not the woman you remember. Life changed me. Jerry reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, tentative but real. Then let me meet the woman you've become. Frances froze, the air thick with emotion. For years she had been surrounded by people who saw her as capable, respectable, even admirable, but never seen. Not like this. Jerry looked at her as if the cracks in her soul were something beautiful. You always talk like love is simple, she said quietly. No, he said. It's just worth it. Something in her broke then, gently like thawing ice. She didn't pull her hand away. They talked for hours that afternoon. About the years they'd lost, the people they'd become, and the small ordinary joys they missed. The smell of rain on books, late-night drives, the silence of early mornings. Frances found herself laughing, a sound she hadn't made in far too long. At one point, Jerry told her about the night he signed his first big deal. Everyone was celebrating, he said. But I went home early. I kept thinking how you'd once said, "Success is lonely if you have no one to tell it to." You were right. Frances smiled wistfully. I said that. Yeah, he chuckled. And I wrote it on my wall for years. She shook her head, amused and touched. You really are impossible. Only when I care, he replied softly. The cafe grew quieter as evening settled. Warm light bathed them through the windows, dust dancing in golden streaks. Felt, right, peaceful. The kind of peace that doesn't shout, it just exists. As they stood by the doorway at closing time, Jerry hesitated. Can I walk you home? Frances smiled faintly. Still the gentleman. Always, he said. And so they walked, side by side beneath the city lights, their shoulders brushing, silence speaking louder than words. Neither said what their hearts were screaming, that love had quietly found its way back to them. Sometimes healing doesn't roar. It whispers through laughter, through presence, through a hand that doesn't let go. Tell me in the comments, do you believe love can truly begin again after being lost? The next few days felt like a dream, one Frances was almost afraid to wake from. Every morning, Jerry showed up at Willow's corner. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with news from the redevelopment committee, sometimes with nothing but a smile that made her heart do inconvenient things. People started to notice. Whispered comments followed her through the market, questioning why a billionaire would spend his days in a small cafe with an older woman. Frances pretended not to care, but the words lodged deep. She had rebuilt her life from gossip once. She couldn't survive it again. That Friday afternoon, Jerry was meeting with a group of city investors in a private lounge nearby. Frances had dropped off some historical photos he'd requested to help pitch the preservation plan. She was supposed to leave them at the front desk and go. But as she approached the door, she heard laughter inside. Jerry's voice, easy and confident. You're telling me the cafe's sentimental value convinced the board? One of the investors joked. Jerry laughed lightly. What can I say? I have a way of using nostalgia when I need to. You should have seen their faces when I mentioned the owner. She's basically the town's sweetheart. Great PR image. The words were casual, flippant, probably harmless in his world of deals and politics. But to Frances they sliced deep. Her breath caught. PR image. Was that all she was? A story to soften his corporate reputation? The charity project of a billionaire who once fancied her? Her fingers tightened around the envelope of photos. She turned before anyone saw her and walked out, each step heavier than the last. That evening, Jerry showed up at the cafe, unaware. He found her behind the counter, her expression unreadable. Hey, he said softly, smiling. Got good news. The board's leaning toward full preservation. We did it, Frances. She didn't look up. We didn't do anything. He frowned. What do you mean? She set the rag down, her voice flat. You don't have to pretend anymore. I heard what you said at the meeting. The confusion in his eyes was genuine. Frances, don't. She cut in, trembling. I thought you cared about this place because it mattered. Because I mattered. But I see now I was just good optics. Something to make your company look noble. He stepped forward. That's not true. You're twisting. Am I? She snapped. You used my name, Jerry. My story. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? Her voice cracked at the end, and it broke something in him. Francis, I swear I didn't mean it that way. Please, she whispered. Don't make this harder. Whatever this was between us, it ends here. He froze, his world tilting. You can't mean that. Her eyes glistened. You're a good man, Jerry, but you don't belong here. Not with me, not in this life. Go back to the world that fits you. Silence filled the room, deafening. Jerry's throat tightened. So that's it? After everything? Francis looked away. After everything. He waited for her to change her mind, to soften, to give him one last reason to stay. But she didn't. Finally, he turned toward the door. His reflection shimmered in the glass, the same way it had years ago. One inside, one outside. Goodbye, Francis, he said, voice low. She stood motionless until the door closed, then sank to the floor, the tears she'd held back finally falling. And outside, Jerry walked into the night, the weight of 8 years pressing down harder than ever before. Sometimes love doesn't end in anger. It ends in silence, in words we wish we could take back. Tell me in the comments, do you think Francis was right to walk away? Or did she let fear win? The next few days unfolded in muted colors. The city felt grayer, the cafe quieter. Frances moved through her routines like a ghost haunting her own life. She told herself she'd done the right thing, that ending things with Jerry before they went too far had been wise, mature. But wisdom, she realized, was cold comfort in an empty shop. Every time the doorbell rang, her heart jumped, only to fall again when it wasn't him. The sound of rain outside had once been peaceful. Now it just reminded her of his voice. By the third day, even her customers noticed her silence. You okay, Miss Francis? A young barista asked gently. She smiled faintly. I'm fine, Clara. Just tired. But she wasn't tired, she was hollow. Meanwhile, across town, Jerry sat in his penthouse suite, surrounded by success he no longer recognized. His assistant spoke, but her words blurred. Contracts, expansions, investor meetings, everything he'd built suddenly felt meaningless. He stood by the window, staring at the city lights that used to excite him. Now they looked like 1,000 closed doors. He remembered the look in Frances's eyes, the mixture of pride and heartbreak when she told him to go. He'd spent years imagining her smile. He'd never imagined being the cause of her pain. That night, he drove aimlessly through Atlanta until he found himself parked across from Willow's Corner. The lights were off. Rain streaked the windows. For a long time, he just sat there, watching the dark outline of the place that had shaped him. Finally, he whispered to himself, You waited 8 years, Jerry. Are you really going to stop now? He turned off the engine, the decision forming in his chest. Not loud, but certain. The next morning, Frances arrived to find an envelope taped to the front door. Her name was written in his handwriting, bold, familiar, trembling. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Frances, you once told me that love isn't about fixing someone. It's about walking beside them until they're ready to heal. You walked beside me when I was 17. You believed I could be more. Now let me do the same for you. If I made you feel used, I'm sorry. I would burn every deal I've made if it meant I could look at you without that pain in your eyes. I won't ask you to forgive me now, but tomorrow night, the city council votes on Willow's preservation. If it passes, I want you there. Not for me, for what we built together, for what still matters. And if you come, I'll know you haven't given up on us. Frances folded the letter carefully, her pulse unsteady. She reread the lines over and over, every word pulling her heart in a direction her fear resisted. That evening, she sat by her window, the letter in her lap. The rain had returned, soft, rhythmic, like the echo of a heartbeat. She remembered Jerry's eyes the last time she saw him. Hurt, yes, but still full of hope. She whispered to herself, "You can't keep living in memories, Francis." She stood, pulled on her coat, and looked at the photo of her old fiancé on the shelf. "Thank you," she said softly, "for teaching me how to love, but it's time I learn how to live again." The decision was quiet, but it changed everything. When she locked up the cafe that night, her steps felt lighter than they had in years. The fear was still there, but underneath it, a spark of something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose love again. Not because it's easy, but because it's still worth it. Cloud with rain. Tell me in the comments, would you go back, even after a heartbreak like that? The next evening, City Hall buzzed with anticipation. The preservation vote had drawn a full crowd. Reporters, investors, and a few locals who still believed in the charm of old Atlanta. Jerry sat in the front row, his expression unreadable, his heart pounding harder than any boardroom negotiation ever had. He hadn't seen Frances since that night. He didn't know if she'd read the letter, if she'd come. But a small, stubborn part of him, the same part that had waited 8 years, refused to give up. The meeting began. Council members reviewed documents, debated logistics, tossed around phrases like economic feasibility and urban modernization. But Jerry wasn't really listening. Every tick of the clock felt heavier. Then, just as the final discussion began, the back doors opened. He turned, and there she was. Frances stood in the doorway, rain still clinging to her coat, her hair slightly damp, eyes searching until they found his. For a moment, the noise in the room disappeared. Jerry exhaled softly, the weight in his chest breaking into something fragile and bright. She walked down the aisle quietly, her gaze steady. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She just nodded, the faintest smile tugging her lips. He whispered, "You came," she murmured. "I told myself if I didn't, I'd regret it forever." He wanted to take her hand, but he didn't. Not yet. Some things were sacred even now. The vote proceeded. The chairwoman called out, "All in favor of preserving Willow's Corner?" Hands rose one after another until the majority had voted yes. Applause erupted, echoing through the chamber. Frances blinked, her lips parting in disbelief. Jerry laughed softly beside her, relief washing through him like sunlight breaking a storm. "It's safe," she whispered. "It's home," he said. And in that moment, she looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy she'd once taught or the man she'd once hurt, but the person who'd loved her without pause, without condition, without end. Later that night, they walked together through the quiet streets. The rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening under streetlights. Willow's Corner stood at the end of the block, its windows glowing faintly, like a beacon waiting for them. Frances stopped in front of it, staring through the glass. "You really did it," she said softly. Jerry smiled. "We did it." She turned toward him. "Why did you fight so hard for something most people would have let go?" He hesitated, his voice low and honest. "Because I learned a long time ago, when something feels like home, you don't just walk away from it. You rebuild it." Her eyes shimmered. "Jerry." He stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "I don't want to fix your past, Frances. I just want to be part of your tomorrow." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. She reached up, cupping his face, her voice trembling. "You waited 8 years for me." He smiled through the emotion. "And I'd wait 8 more if it meant ending up right here." Their foreheads touched. The world fell silent except for the soft hum of city lights and the whisper of their breathing. Then, for the first time, she kissed him, slow, uncertain, but filled with the ache of everything they'd lost and everything they'd finally found. When they pulled apart, She laughed quietly, a sound of pure release. You know, she said, you could have found someone younger, less complicated. He chuckled. I wasn't looking for easy. I was looking for you. And beneath the silver glow of the night, with the scent of rain and coffee mingling in the air, Francis finally believed that love, the kind that endures years, pain, and distance, had come home to stay. Sometimes love isn't about timing. It's about endurance. The heart always finds its way back to what feels like home. Tell me in the comments, would you wait 8 years for the one who once got away? Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.